Welcome to History class. Today we are to continue our lesson, the First World War, and today we are going to discuss the warfare of the First World War. Before we go ahead with the lesson, let's understand the learning objectives of the topic. The objectives of the topic are crisis leading to the outbreak of the war, condition of Europe on the eve of the 20th century, Anglo-German rivalry, factors leading to the formation of Triple Entente, the crisis in the Balkans, the Balkan Wars, the Austro-Serbian rivalry in Sarajevo murder, the course of the First World War, warfare or technology of the First World War, why did the USA join the First World War, and causes of Germany's defeat in 1918. In this chapter, we had already discussed many objectives of the chapter concerned, like crisis leading to the outbreak of the war, condition of Europe on the eve of 20th century, Anglo-German rivalry, factor leading to the formation of Triple Entente, the crisis in the Balkans, the Austro-Serbian rivalry and Sarajevo murder. In the last session, we had discussed the course of the First World War, the actual battles of the First World War, and in this module, we are going to discuss the warfare or the technology which was used in the First World War. Before discussion of the topic, we will discuss the new words related with this topic. Trench, a long, narrow ditch dug by troops to provide them a place of shelter from enemy fire. So it was a place where the soldiers can survive themselves in case of any injury from their enemy side. Zeppelins, the rigid German airships named after Ferdinand von Zeppelin, and Ferdinand von Zeppelin was German Chancellor, the second highest position in Germany. Interrupter gear, the weapon developed during the First World War, which ensured that an armament attached to a single-engine aircraft could fire from spinning arc of a propeller without damaging propeller blade. And other name of interrupter gear was gun synchronizer. Submarine, a completely submerged underground warship designed to operate underwater for a long period of time, equipped with missile for torpedo attack. So it was a new development during First World War that this World War was even fought under the water with the help of the submarines, where the modern technology like missiles were equipped there with the submarines. The trench warfare. One of the important features of the World War I was the introduction of new technology in the battlefield. So first we will discuss the trench warfare. Trench warfare led to the development of concrete pillbox, a hardened blockhouse. This hardened box could be used to deliver machine gun fire on the enemies. Soldiers with machine guns could be placed inside the box to start firing on advancing enemy. So it was a type of safeguard for the enemy where you can hide yourself and attack on the other side. Let's understand more the trench warfare. The trenches were like maze stretching for miles. This network of trenches linked bunker, communications and gun emplacements. In these trenches, the soldiers either burned under the sun or froze during the winter, so it was very difficult for the soldiers to survive there. It was helpful because the injured soldiers could be there and they could detect the position of the enemy, but physically living long time in trenches were quite difficult. Tunneling underneath enemy line became one of the major efforts during the war. Once the position of the enemy was detected, huge amount of explosives would be planted for an overland charge. Sensitive listening devices could detect the sounds of digging. This World War was different from traditional wars because new technology was developed. Big tunnels were dug, and it was the first time that enemy was attacked underneath the tunnels. Once you were sure about the exact position of your enemy, you could explode high amount of explosives and weapons on your enemy side. New technology was developed, new listening devices was developed which could help you to hear the digging sound of your enemy so that you can make an action accordingly. So it's a type of fighting where both sides stayed in deep trenches to avoid the gunfire up top. Trench warfare used on the Western Front, the line between France and Germany, that rarely moved. These trenches were protected by barbed wire and concrete machine gun nests. The next is the use of poison or biological war during the First World War. Use of poison. At the beginning of the war, Germany had the most advanced chemical industry. Germany used the chemical industry to produce this poison. Germany used this decisive weapon to break the deadlock of trench warfare. Thus, chlorine gas was first used on the battlefield at the Second Battle of Ypres in Belgium in April 1915. This World War was unique and different from other traditional wars, as it was not only a war of armaments, it was starting off biological war. First time ever, science and technology was used to such a limit in any war. It was made sure that you have to beat your enemy at any cost. If not possible with the help of the trenches, then the chemical gases were introduced in the war. Many people believe that it was the Germans who used the gas for the first time in the First World War, but actually the French were the first to implement gas into warfare by using tear gas grenades in August of 1914, the first month of the World War. The tear gas side effects can result in pain with one's vision, respiratory system and skin. Vomiting and blindness can ensue if one is exposed for a long period of time. The gas had a devastating effect on the soldiers. Later on, mustard gas, phosgene and other gases were used. Britain and France soon followed with their own gas weapon. Later on, gas masks were developed and this greatly reduced the effectiveness of gas as a weapon. First time ever in any war, chemical weapons were used. This poorly affected the health of the soldiers. Many soldiers died because of the poor effect of this gas. It was not only chlorine, phosgene and mustard gases were also used by the different countries. It poorly affected the health of the soldiers. They suffered from the lung diseases. Later on, some countries like Britain was the first who developed the gas mask, and slowly all other European countries also use the gas mask, which reduced the effect of the gas in the First World War. On your screen, you can see a chart which shows the type of gases which were used in the First World War. Tear gas, chlorine, phosgene and mustard gas. The second last column shows the year when it was first introduced in the war, and the last column is showing the death casualties caused due to these gases. The next is the use of tanks. Use of tanks. The earlier tanks were unreliable because these tanks broke down often. Still, the use of tanks terrified the Germans when it was used in 1917 engagements. But it was soon realized that the tanks needed infantry support for its success. Use of tanks in war was not a new phenomenon. Even before First World War, tanks were used in war, but they were not much dependable as they used to break down very easily. Still, tanks had an effect on many big countries, like the German forces were terrified when it has to face in 1917 the big tank engagement of Russia. But with the passage of time, it was realized that tanks alone could not be successful. It needed the help of other armaments loaded with good quality trained soldiers. Tanks were fielded in large numbers as they were being made. In November 1917, during the Battle of Cambrai, they began to show their potentialities. In spite of the weaknesses, the tanks played an important role in the Battle of Amiens. Regardless of their effects on the First World War, tank technology and mechanized warfare had been launched and grew increasingly sophisticated in the years following the war. Some people hold the view that the tanks were a big weakness of the First World War, but we cannot deny the role played by the tank technology in November 1917, the Battle of Cambrai, and in the same year in the Battle of Amiens, where the Germans were terrified by the tank engagement of Russia and Britain respectively. Actually, the tank warfare had been a legacy of the First World War to modern era. Tanks had been developed after the First World War. In the Second World War, this technology reached to a great height. If we see our modern era, we see highly sophisticated tanks, and it is all due to the tank warfare started in the First World War. The use of air warfare. Air warfare. The aircraft technology underwent many improvements during the war period. As the early air spotters were unarmed, they began firing at each other with handheld weapons. Very soon, planes equipped with machine guns were introduced. Germany invented interrupter gear, and this was a great achievement in the field of science and technology. This allowed a machine gun to be mounted behind propellers so the pilot could directly fire ahead along with the plane's flight path. That means that even without handling any armaments in his hand, the pilot was able to attack on his enemy's side. So this was the new development which took place during the First World War. With the advancement of the war, planes became greatly important for gathering intelligence of the enemy position and bombing their supplies behind the trench line. So airplanes became very important to attack the resources of the enemy, the weapons and other resources of the enemy which were behind the trenches, and also to bombing the enemy side and gathering the secret information of the enemy. Large planes with pilot and an observer were employed to bomb the supply bases of the enemy side. As these planes were large and slow in speed, so these became very easy targets of the enemies. As a result, both sides means Allied and the Central Powers, started using fighter aircrafts to attack and protect their own. So instead of planes, they started using the fighter aircraft which was much faster in speed, which could protect their own planes and attack on the planes of the enemy side. Another innovation of Germany was Zeppelins. The Germans used these airships to make occasional bombing raids on military targets and London and other British cities. Later in the war, Germany started attacking English cities with long-range strategic bombs. One of the great innovations of the First World War was the Zeppelins, which was invented in Germany. Now, Zeppelin was specially invented to target London and the base camp of Britain. So, the aircraft technology developed during the First World War. Germany was the one who was taking a lead in developing the aircraft technology, whether it was the Zeppelin or it was the interrupter gear. Manned observation balloon. Manned observation balloons. The manned observation balloons were also used above the trenches for reporting enemy troop position and directing artillery fire. These balloons had a crew of 2, each equipped with parachutes so they could jump out in case of enemy attack on flammable balloons. Recognized for their values as observer platforms, these balloons were important targets of enemy aircraft. To protect against air attack, these balloons were highly protected by large concentration of aircraft guns. So these were helpful to guide the artillery to move in right direction and also report the artillery about the direction of the enemy troop. And these were useful for seeking out the secret information of the enemy side. The next is the role played by the submarines. Use of submarines. In the First World War, submarines were used as serious weapons of war. The United Kingdom relied heavily on imports to feed its population and supply for its war industry. The German Navy wanted to block and starve Britain by attacking merchant ships with submarines. Because of the involvement of the submarines during the First World War, it is rightly said that the war was fought on land, in the air, in the water, and even under the water. One side used to attack on the other even under the water with proper developed technology, like with the help of missiles and torpedo attacks. There used to be highly mechanized technology working under the sea. There was a race between England and Germany to prove themselves best naval power. It was a plan of Germany that all the British ships should be submerged in the water, and it was a plan of the German Navy to block and starve Britain by attacking on all its merchant ships. That means Germany wanted to outbeat England in naval supremacy. This struggle between German submarine and British countermeasure became known as the First Battle of Atlantic. As German submarines were more effective, the British Navy followed the convoy system in which a large number of merchant ships were protected by armed navy vessels. Due to anti-submarine weapon, the convoy system reduced British losses to German U-boat attack. To prove themselves as the best navy power in the world, England and Germany had to fight a battle called the First Battle of Atlantic, where German submarines proved to be better as compared to the British submarines. For their protection, the British has started a policy called convoy system, where the merchant ships were given protection by the navy vessels of Britain, and as a result they could survive the German U-boat attack and can lessen its losses due to the German attack on U-boat. In this module, we have covered these questions. How were the trenches useful for soldiers in the First World War? When was chlorine gas used for the first time in the First World War? Discuss the role played by interrupter gear in the First World War. And how did the invention of Zeppelins help Germany in the First World War? I hope you have understood this topic. If you want to explore more on this topic, you can see a YouTube link on your screen where you can get some extra information on this topic. I hope this module have been very useful for you. With the help of this explanation and internet, you advise to make the notes of the above topic. Till then, have a nice day. We'll meet you in next session.